Ippo Makanouchi, helping his mother, Hiroka Makanouchi, with the Makanouchi fishing boat, carries several boxes onto the boat and sees everyone off. The next day at school, he's invited to see a movie with some classmates. He's happy to be invited, but declines because he has to help with the store. He then overhears his classmates making fun of him on their way out and heads home saddened. He only gets as far as a nearby bridge when he runs into Masahiko Umezawa and his goons. They begin to beat on Ippo for making the school stink of worms and take him under the bridge. Umezawa implies that Ippo's mother must stink too, causing Ippo to glare at him. But when Umezawa glares back, Ippo backs down, infuriating Umezawa more for never showing any backbone. As they continue, Mamoru Takamura suddenly passes by during his road work and saves Ippo. Umezawa and his group try to attack him, but he easily dodges their blows and steals their uniform buttons, scaring them away. Ippo passes out from the pain after only being able to say incredible. When he awakens, Ippo finds himself in the Kamogawa boxing gym. Takamura informs him that he brought him here to treat his wounds, and then promptly tells him to get lost, saying that as much as he dislikes bullies, he finds people who don't stand up for themselves downright pathetic. As Ippo begins to leave, Takamura reluctantly decides to let him take his anger out on the punching bag. At first, Ippo's punch seems average, but after a pointer from Takamura, he proves to have a devastating punch. Takamura takes Ippo to the back room to treat his now scraped knuckles and realizes that he's more muscular than he seems, which Ippo attributes to years of working for the family trade. He tries to convince Ippo to try fighting back if Umezawa ever bothers him again, but Ippo's too afraid that won't solve anything. Takamura then asks Ippo if he'd prefer if things stayed the same. He gives him some boxing tapes before heading off to continue his road work, telling Ippo to return them whenever. Ippo returns home and helps his mother load the boat, carrying several ice boxes at once. Before she leaves, his mother tells him to leave the work to her and be a high school student. He laments not standing up for his mother earlier and then goes inside to watch the tapes. Impressed, Ippo begins to ask himself what it means to be strong. As the days go on, Ippo begins to watch boxing and starts reading boxing magazines. In one magazine, he finds an article about Takamura's Rookie King victory. After a few days, Ippo waits at the bridge for Takamura to give him the tapes back, mentioning the magazine article he found. As Takamura brags, Ippo asks if he should give boxing a try. Takamura is initially amused, believing that Ippo wants to just try the exercises and diets. But when Ippo clarifies that he wants to become a pro boxer, Takamura gets angry at the idea of a weakling like him impulsively deciding to become a boxer. Ippo then says that he's thought seriously about this and wants to become a boxer no matter what. He asks Takamura, what does it mean to be strong? Takamura then walks up to a nearby tree and kicks it, causing leaves to fall from the branches. He then catches several of them with his hands before they hit the ground and promises to teach Ippo boxing if he can catch 10 in 1 week. In his frustration, he trains for hours and even forgets about work. Worried at first, he sees a letter from his mother which encourages to keep up with the activity as he's doing. After several days of failed attempts, he reflects on his struggle and notices Takamura's fist formation and speed, quickly adapting himself to perform the technique on the eve of the promised day. The next day, as Takamura does some road work, he finds Ippo sitting on the side of the track, waiting for him. Ippo said that he has found the way to catch 10 leaves. As Takamura is waiting, Ippo hits the tree, as the leaves come down and gets ready to catch 10 of them. Ippo starts to throw jabs, but he only catches 10 leaves with his left, but not with his both hands. Takamura is surprised and tells him to throw jabs. Ippo overdoes it and Takamura gets angry and makes a swing at him to stop. The next day, Takamura introduces Ippo to the Kamogawa boxing gym, but as Ippo tries to say hello to the other gym mates, Genji Kamogawa and Haruhiko Yagi come out of the room and see the new face Takamura brought to the gym, that being Ippo. He takes Takamura immediately behind the door and shouts that Ippo is not the kind of person for boxing, and that he's disappointed with him. Afterwards, Takamura takes Ippo to the changing room and to tell him that he'll be sparring. Ippo doesn't like the sound of it, but he changes and gets ready for his sparring match. As Ippo comes out with Takamura and sees Kamogawa and Yagi, Takamura asks of who he will be sparring, and Kamogawa shows Ichiro Miyata. As the match starts and bell rings, Ippo swings completely off what boxing is. Miyata just catches and leaves Ippo's fists as they are nothing at all. Takamura shouts to Ippo to turtle, and he does. As Ippo left his body wide open, Miyata comes out with a body blow, and then, with a left, hits him in the face, and as Ippo goes down talking to himself that he cannot understand what happened. And that was a really quick match. Against all belief that he has lost, Ippo stands and readies his guard, surprised that someone his own age could be so good at boxing. Miyata repeats his fighting pattern and gives Ippo his second down, prompting Takamura to yell at Ippo for letting his own guard drop. Struggling to get up a second time, a disoriented Ippo hears Takamura encouraging him, and with a newfound determination, he stands. Seeing him being outclassed, Takamura then yells at Ippo to use his legs, and the latter runs frantically to the other end of the ring. Takamura's hope of Miyata not using his right hand is soon crushed when the other gym members start laughing at Miyata for failing to bring Ippo down quickly. As the second round begins, Ippo works on his footwork, while Miyata deduces his cautiousness and steps in for an attack. Ippo catches him off guard with a flurry of jabs, which leaves everyone astonished. Despite this, Miyata dodges and blocks with ease, but is trapped in the corner. Ippo is then told by Takamura to throw a right straight, but he swings too wide, causing his own body to stumble forward. Miyata, wondering about his opponent's stamina, loses his balance, giving Ippo the opportunity to throw a successful right that breaks through Miyata's guard and leaves him petrified. Ippo prepares to throw another devastating right at the now unguarded Miyata. Ippo's straight is stopped by the ring of the bell, saving Miyata and ending the second round. All spectators present are impressed with Ippo, and Takamura advises him to use everything he's learned in the following round. As the third round begins, Ippo starts on the offensive with jabs, but he has yet to land a proper hit on Miyata and believes that Miyata would never let it happen. A series of jabs from Miyata create an opening for a final punch on Ippo's jaw, which knocks the latter down. Miyata is convinced the match is over, but Ippo gets up with an immense fighting spirit, punching his own legs to force them into moving, to everyone's amazement. Annoyed, Miyata then throws a counter, knocking Ippo onto the ground, ending the match. As Ippo is passed out, Takamura tells the members to bring out a bucket of water. Takamura goes to Kamogawa to tell him that's the reason why he brought him here. Kamogawa immediately agrees and welcomes him to the gym. When Ippo wakes up and finds out that he passed the test and is now a member of the gym, he cries tears of joy to become a pro boxer. Ippo arrives at the gym and then he meets Aoki Kimura, who teases him. Ippo enters the gym and is greeted by Yagi, who gets interrupted by Aoki and Kimura. Aoki and Kimura brings Ippo to the room next door and tells them that they'll teach him the basics of boxing. Before they go downstairs, Takamura sees them and states that he will train Ippo. As Takamura, Aoki, and Kimura fight, Kamogawa appears and orders everyone to train and that he will be the one to train Ippo. Kamogawa and Ippo starts training with the mitts. Takamura watches and points out that Kamogawa is using unadapted mitts to produce a better sound and feel when punched, and that he's also positioning the mitts in a way that helps a boxer's punch angle. As Ippo mitt trains, the coach says that if Ippo's punches hit an opponent like Ichiro Miyata, they would be in trouble, and that if he keeps training, in 3 months, he would be at Miyata's level. Miyata overheard what Kamogawa was saying and glared at Ippo. Kamogawa continues and says that Ippo only lost because he only knew how to use straights, and that if he learns how to use multi-directional punches, he could beat Miyata. Kamogawa demonstrates an uppercut. The next day, as Ippo was rope training, he sees Miyata and trips over the rope, causing him to fall. Kamogawa tells Ippo to get in the ring to learn how to do an uppercut. Kamogawa shows Ippo how to position the body for an uppercut. Ippo does an uppercut as Kamogawa had shown him, but he misses the mitt. That evening, while Takamura, Aoki, and Kimura are running, Takamura states that it was a perfect uppercut. The following day, Kamogawa tells Ippo to train by shadowboxing. Not knowing what shadowboxing is, he asks Kimura to tell him how to shadowbox. Kimura demonstrates shadowboxing, Aoki then goes and demonstrates it. They both disagree with each other, they fight and knock themselves out. Ippo then watches gym matches shadowboxing and figures out how they are fighting an invisible opponent. Ippo imagines Miyata, but needs to see how Miyata moves in order to shadowbox. Ippo sees Miyata sparring, but didn't see how Miyata knocked his opponent out. That night, Ippo is laying on the floor in the living room at his house, imagining how Miyata moves. Ippo's mother asks Miyata about leaves in a magazine. Saying they're his treasure, he grabs them and remembers his leaf training. The next day, Ippo watches Miyata sparring with a gym mate. He focuses on Miyata's footwork. He tries to learn what he would do about Miyata's footwork, but fails. 3 days later, Ippo watches Miyata spar. He notices how Miyata punches. After school, Ippo runs into Umezawa, who tells Ippo to hang out with them. Ippo refuses and runs. Umezawa and his gang couldn't keep up and notice that Ippo was running faster. That night, Ippo shadowboxes at the gym and finally captures Miyata's shadow. Ippo attempts to shadowbox. He asks Kimura for pointers, but Kimura and Aoki teases him. Ippo asks Kimura how to deal with Miyata's counter, leaving Kamogawa to order for Ippo to get into the ring. Kamogawa explains to Ippo to irritate Miyata by making him wait. Then, when he rushes towards Ippo, uppercut him. Ippo and Kamogawa begin mitt training as Miyata Sr. watches. Ippo takes a break and sits down next to Miyata's father. As Miyata talks with his father, Ippo begins to realize that man is Miyata's father. The next day, as Ippo does multiple training exercises, Kamigawa and Miyata's father talk about Ippo's potential and Miyata's motivation. After training, Ippo goes to the shower room. Takamura goes towards Ippo and notices Ippo's towel around his waist and asks him why he's wearing it. Takamura, teasing Ippo, takes the towel off. Takamura tells Ippo that he should buy boxing shoes. Ippo goes to Oda Sports, where he asks for boxing shoes. The store clerk shows Ippo an expensive pair for outboxers. Miyata notices and stops Ippo from buying it. Instead, he shows Ippo a different pair of shoes suited for an infighter like Ippo. After Ippo buys the shoes, he goes to Miyata to thank him. He attempts to treat him with juice. Miyata declines. After Ippo protests, Miyata accepts the offer. As they drink, Ippo tells Miyata how jealous he is about Miyata having his father teaching him boxing. Miyata talks about what his father was like as a boxer and how he retired due to an injury, and how Miyata trained ever since. The next day, Ippo tells Kamigawa that he wants to take Miyata head-on. Kamigawa says to get ready for harsh training. For weeks, Ippo trained. During training, he goes with Takamura and Kimura to Chuka Soba, and finds out that Aoki works there. For the next few weeks, Ippo continues training. On the last day, Kamigawa comments that Ippo is ready for the sparring tomorrow. After school, Umezawa and gang notices Ippo. They don't attempt to chase him because he runs too fast. At his house, Ippo asks his mother if he's changed since the last 3 months. His mother tells him to imagine the opponent's face as a fish. As Ippo is jogging, he notices a girl riding a bicycle. At the gym, Fuji enters and talks with Yagi about the new article series titled Meeting New Faces, and wants to have a few comments with Miyata. Kimura and Aoki interrupts the conversation, but Fuji states that he just wants to interview boxers who he believes have potential. Fuji asks why Takamura is wearing a bow tie, to which the latter replies that he's a referee at a sparring match for Ippo and Miyata. Fuji, interested, goes over to watch the upcoming sparring match. Takamura explains the rules to Ippo and Miyata as they get ready to fight. Ippo, nervous, tries to think of Miyata as a fish, but fails. Ippo sees an octopus. He realizes it's Kamigawa. The latter tells Ippo to show him what he has learned in the last 3 months he trained. As the bell's about to ring, Ippo and Miyata reminisce about what they had talked about before their match. The bell rings and Ippo surprisingly rushes for Miyata. He throws several jabs, but Miyata is able to dodge them. Ippo waits for Miyata to move, but when he does, he goes a different direction Ippo was expecting. Ippo keeps watching Miyata's footwork and begins to be able to keep up with him. The gym members note that Miyata is using his legs in ways he never has before, causing Fuji to wonder how someone like Ippo could push Miyata like this. Miyata's father orders to attack, but Ippo dodges the punch and then hits Miyata with a 1-2, knocking him down and shocking everyone, including Ippo himself. Everyone at the gym is in shock, including Miyata, who doesn't stand up until the count of 9. Ippo tries another 1-2, but Miyata easily dodges and knocks him down with a counter. As the audience is convinced that the match is over, Ippo stands back up at the count of 6. The two continue to fight and their gym mates wonder why he's having trouble. Ippo forces Miyata to lose his balance and goes for a right straight, but the former easily dodges it and goes for a counter. To everyone's surprise, Ippo steps into the counter and takes it face first, because this reduces the damage. As Fuji explains to his assistant, he's able to knock Miyata down with an overhead punch. Though it seriously hurt, Miyata is able to stand up, and the fight resumes. Ippo decides to start finding an opportunity to use the uppercut. He goes forward and dodges a punch from Miyata. He ducks down, getting ready to use an uppercut. Miyata notices what Ippo's doing and counters the uppercut, causing Ippo to go down. Ippo struggles to get up, but he gets up at the count of 8. As the bell rings, round 1 is over. Ippo and Miyata go to their corners.